November 12, 1942, Richmond, California. A 10,000-ton ocean-going ship slides into the water. 4 days ago she didn't exist. 4 days, 15 hours and 29 minutes keel to launch. This is the story of the Liberty ships, the ugly, brilliant American cargo fleet that broke Germany's U-boats without firing a shot. Germany's submarine war was never about battles, it was about one brutal equation, and in 1943 that equation flipped so hard that the U-boat command effectively lost the war on paper. Stay to the end, and you'll see the exact numbers that told them it was over, and the shipbuilder who'd never built a ship who made it happen. To understand why the Liberty ships mattered, forget everything you picture about naval battles. The Battle of the Atlantic was not a battle, it was arithmetic. Britain is an island. Every gallon of fuel, every ton of food, every tank and bullet for the fight against Hitler had to cross the Atlantic by ship. No ships, no Britain. No Britain, no invasion of Europe. Ever. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's U-boats, understood this with icy clarity. His strategy even had a name, the tonnage war. The idea was simple. Ignore warships, hunt the slow, fat cargo vessels, sink Allied merchant tonnage faster than Allied shipyards can replace it. Do that long enough, and Britain starves without a single German soldier stepping on her beaches. Notice what that means. In a tonnage war, the enemy isn't really the Royal Navy or the US Navy. The enemy is a shipyard. The U-boat's true opponent was a welder in California she would never see, and in 1942 Dönitz was winning. His wolf packs were tearing convoys apart faster than the Allies could build replacements. Every month the ledger tilted further toward Germany. Merchant sailors were dying in the cold Atlantic by the thousands. The math was heading toward a British collapse. Understand what those ledger entries meant on the water. Each ton was a real ship, with a real crew of civilians, merchant sailors hauling aviation fuel and ammunition through submarine hunting grounds. When a torpedo hit a tanker, the sea itself caught fire. These men had no armor, little speed, and knew exactly what cargo they were sitting on. They sailed anyway, convoy after convoy. Their courage bought time. But courage doesn't change arithmetic. The Allies could not torpedo their way out of this. Escorts and sonar helped, but a defended convoy that arrives doesn't add ships to the pool. It only protects the ships you have. The tonnage equation had two sides, sinkings on one side, shipbuilding on the other, and in 1942, nobody on Earth believed shipbuilding could move fast enough to matter. 8 months per ship was the settled wisdom of an ancient industry. You cannot rush steel. Everyone knew that. America was about to prove everybody wrong, and the man who would do it had never built a ship in his life. Henry J. Kaiser was not a shipbuilder. Before 1940, he had never built a single ship. What he had built was almost everything else. His construction companies helped raise the Hoover Dam out of the Nevada desert, then the Grand Coulee Dam, then the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. Kaiser was a man who looked at impossible schedules the way other men looked at lunch menus. When the war came, Washington needed cargo ships in numbers no one had ever imagined. The traditional shipbuilding industry worked the way it had for generations, skilled craftsmen, riveted hulls, one ship rising slowly on one slipway. A merchant ship took around 230 days to build, nearly 8 months. Dönitz's torpedoes needed seconds. Kaiser looked at shipbuilding the way he'd looked at dams, not as a craft, as a flow problem. Concrete doesn't care about tradition, and neither did he. On the Hoover Dam, the question was never, how is this usually done? It was, what is the bottleneck, and how do we remove it today? He didn't know the old rules of the shipyard, and that turned out to be his superpower. A man who knows the rules knows why things are impossible. Kaiser never learned why shipbuilding was slow, so he simply refused to do it slowly. He wasn't going to build ships the way shipwrights did. He was going to build them the way Detroit built cars. The Navy men were skeptical. The design itself won no hearts either. The Liberty ship was slow, boxy and plain built for capacity, not beauty. Rear Admiral Emery Land, who ran the Maritime Commission, described them with a line that stuck. They will carry a good load, but they aren't much to look at. They're a real ugly duckling. The ugly ducklings were about to save the war. Here's the revolution, and it's simple enough to explain in one line. Kaiser built the ship before it ever touched the shipway. Traditional yards assembled a hull piece by piece, plate by plate in place. Workers swarmed over one skeleton, waiting on each other, riveting millions of connections by hand. Only so many men can stand on one keel. The ship itself was the bottleneck. Kaiser's yards shattered the ship into giant prefabricated sections, deckhouses, bow units, double-bottom segments. These blocks were welded together in open assembly areas, away from the slipway. Some weighed more than 50 tons. Cranes then swung entire pre-built chunks of ship into position, and welders joined them like a colossal steel puzzle. And notice the word welded, not riveted. This was the quiet heresy at the heart of the whole system. Riveting was a proud, difficult trade that took years to master, hot steel driven by coordinated crews, connection by connection, millions of times per hull. Welding was faster, needed far less training, and used less steel. A continuous weld seam replaced thousands of hand-driven rivets. One trainee with a torch could do work that once demanded a whole rivet gang. Traditionalists distrusted it. Welded hulls were unproven, they said, and the old ways had a century of ocean behind them. Kaiser bet the Atlantic on the torch. The effect on manpower was staggering. A conventional yard could put about 700 workers on a ship. Kaiser's block system put more than 2,400 workers on the same ship at the same time, because most of them weren't on the ship at all. They were building her pieces all over the yard, and here's the part engineers will love. The system learned. Every ship taught the yard something. Crews refined the block sequence, the crane choreography, the weld order, and each hull went down the ways faster than the one before it. The numbers tell the story better than any speech. In early 1942, a Liberty ship took roughly 250 days and over 1 million labor hours. By late 1943, under 50 days and 500,000 hours. Half the time and half the labor at the same moment. Kaiser's average fell to 45 days, then under 3 weeks, from keel to a finished ocean-ready ship. 8 months to 3 weeks. That is not an improvement. That is a different universe. And Dönitz's equation was about to feel it. Now ask the obvious question. Where do you find hundreds of thousands of shipbuilders in a country whose men are shipping out to fight? Kaiser's answer rewrote American industry. You don't find experienced shipwrights. You make shipbuilders out of anyone willing to learn. His yards hired thousands of women and put welding torches in their hands. They hired African-American workers into skilled roles that traditional yards had long kept closed. Waitresses, farmhands, schoolteachers, and store clerks became welders, burners, and riggers. People who had never seen a shipyard were laying perfect seams within weeks. The block system made it possible to break shipbuilding into repeatable steps, and a trained newcomer could master her step and do it superbly. The old guild model asked for a decade of apprenticeship. The Kaiser model asked for steady hands, good training, and the willingness to work a hard shift. America turned out to be full of exactly that. Think about what a German U-boat officer would have made of this. His navy ran on years of specialist training. His enemy was mass-producing ocean-going ships with a workforce that 18 months earlier had never held a torch. And the ships worked. This is the part of the Liberty ship story that should make you sit up. The miracle wasn't just clever engineering. It was a bet on ordinary Americans that, given a clear task and a fair shot, they would outbuild an empire. The bet paid off in steel. Labor hours per ship fell by more than half, while the workforce got less experienced on paper. Every one of those welders was, functionally, a combatant in the Battle of the Atlantic. They never saw a U-boat. The U-boats would learn to fear them anyway. Which brings us back to Richmond, California, November 1942, the stunt that told the world the math had changed. Kaiser's yards had turned shipbuilding into a race, and yard crews competed like ball teams. That November, Richmond Yard No. 2 decided to show what the system could really do. The target, assemble one complete Liberty ship, the SS Robert E. Peary, faster than anyone had ever dreamed. The preparation was itself an engineering feat. Every block was pre-built, inspected and staged in exact order before the clock ever started. Every crane lift was choreographed in advance, like a moon launch run in reverse. Then the keel went down at 1 minute past midnight, November 8th. Cranes swung 50-ton sections through the night air. Welders worked in relays, shift after shift, around the clock, each crew handing its seams to the next without a wasted minute. Spectators came to watch a ship appear. The hull rose not in months, not in weeks, in shifts. By day 2 she had a bottom and bulkheads. By day 3 decks. By day 4 a superstructure. At 3:27 in the afternoon of November 12th, The Robert E. Peary slid into San Francisco Bay, keel to launch, 4 days, 15 hours and 29 minutes, a real ship, 10,000 tons. She loaded cargo and went to war, and here's the detail that turns a record into a legend. Asked about the pace, Kaiser noted the ship could have been finished in about 8 days at normal full speed. The extra push was for the headlines, and part of the schedule had even been arranged around a presidential visit, so Franklin Roosevelt could see a Kaiser yard at work. Building a ship in under 5 days was, for this system, a demonstration, not a limit. The Peary was propaganda, sure, but propaganda made of 10,000 tons of welded steel is also something else. It's a message to Admiral Dönitz, and the message was, you cannot win. Now let's open Dönitz's ledger and watch his war die. Remember the tonnage equation. Germany wins if sinkings outrun construction. Through shipyards they did. But through 1942, America's new shipyards were still ramping training workers, laying out assembly areas, learning the block system. The curve was bending. Berlin either didn't see it or didn't want to. Then came 1943. American yards hit full stride, delivering at a pace of nearly 800,000 tons of new shipping per month. Sit with that figure for a second. A month of American shipyard output now weighed more than everything a fleet of submarines could realistically destroy in the same month, while the yards were still accelerating. 18 shipyards were turning out Liberty ships in a river of steel. Kaiser's yards alone would launch nearly 1,500 vessels during the war, over a quarter of everything the U.S. Maritime Commission built. One industrialist operation by itself, outproducing the losses inflicted by an entire enemy navy. Hold those numbers against the other side of the ledger. In all of 1943, a year of maximum effort, with more U-boats at sea than ever, German submarines destroyed about 6.14 million tons of Allied shipping. American builders alone delivered 18 million tons in the same year. 18 million built, 6 million sunk. For every ton Dönitz's crew sent to the bottom, America launched nearly 3 tons of replacement. The tonnage war wasn't just failing, it was running in reverse. Every month of fighting left the Allies with a bigger merchant fleet than the month before. Put yourself in a U-boat officer's boots in late 1943. Escorts and aircraft are hunting you harder than ever. Your comrades' boats are vanishing at a terrifying rate. And even when you win, even when your torpedoes run true and a freighter breaks in half, you know 3 more just slid down American ways. Sinking ships had become like bailing the ocean with a bucket. That is what defeat by arithmetic looks like. The U-boats stayed dangerous to the last day of the war, but strategically, the Welders had already beaten them. Step back and look at what this fleet became. 2,751 Liberty ships, the largest class of ships ever built, before or since. They were never glamorous. They plodded across the ocean no faster than a kid on a bicycle. Sailors joked about them. Admirals apologized for them. But those ugly ducklings became the circulatory system of the entire Allied war effort. Every theater ran on their holds. The fuel, food, ammunition, trucks and medicine that sustained armies from North Africa to the Pacific crossed the water in mass-produced hulls welded by first-year shipbuilders. When the Allies finally stormed back into Europe, the mountain of supplies behind that invasion floated across the Atlantic in ships that hadn't existed 2 years earlier. No Liberty fleet, no build-up, no liberation. The most famous soldiers of the 20th century went to war standing on cargo that ugly ducklings carried, and the fleet was so large that losses lost their sting. A torpedoed Liberty ship was a tragedy for her crew, and merchant sailors bore terrible risks that deserve remembering alongside any uniformed service. But to the war's arithmetic, the fleet as a whole had become effectively unsinkable. Germany could destroy ships. It could no longer destroy shipping. That distinction between the vessel and the system is the entire strategic story of the Atlantic, compressed into one sentence. There's a lesson buried in that distinction, and it's the heart of this story. Wars between industrial nations are won by systems, not duels. Germany built superb submarines, crewed by brave and skilled men, and it did not matter because America built a machine that built ships and aimed it at the Atlantic. Here's the strange mercy of the tonnage war. Both sides could read the same numbers. Dönitz was many things, but he was not a fool. His entire strategy rested on a monthly ledger, and by late 1943, that ledger was screaming. New Allied tonnage wasn't just replacing his sinkings, it was burying them. The U-boat arm kept fighting with desperate courage and dwindling odds. But the strategic question, can Germany sever the Atlantic, had been answered, not by an admiral, by Richmond, Portland, Baltimore, and 30-odd months of American overtime. The commanders in the grey boats understood their position with professional clarity. Britain wasn't starving, it was stockpiling. American armies were landing, supplied everywhere. The Atlantic lifeline they had bled to cut was thicker than the day the war began. They had lost the shipyard war, the only war their strategy was built to win. There's something almost tragic in it, from a purely military view. The U-boat crews suffered among the worst casualty rates of any service in the war. They executed their mission with skill and nerve to the very end. And none of it could matter, because their true opponent was never the escort overhead. It was an assembly line in California that never slept, never surfaced, and could not be torpedoed. One historian's line captures the whole campaign. American industry could simply overwhelm Germany's submarines, literally building ships faster than they could be sunk. Read that sentence again. Literally faster than they could be sunk. That's not a slogan. That's the 1943 ledger, in plain English. So the numbers that told the U-boat command it was over. 18 million tons of American merchant shipping built in 1943, 6.14 million tons sunk, nearly 3 tons launched for every one lost, an average build time under 50 days, and one ship famously in 4 days, 15 hours and 29 minutes. And the man behind it never built a ship before 1940. Henry Kaiser won the Battle of the Atlantic with dam builder logic. Break the impossible into pieces, hand the pieces to ordinary people, and let American industry do what it does best, scale. The lesson outlived the war. Every time American industry has been counted out too slow, too old, too comfortable somewhere, there's a Kaiser who never learned why it can't be done. That's not nostalgia. That's a documented, repeatable formula, and 1943 is the proof. We remember the war through its warriors, and we should. But remember this too. Somewhere in 1943, a U-boat commander surfaced to report another kill, and it changed nothing, because 8,000 miles away, a welder finishing her shift had already replaced his victory before breakfast. That welder won the Atlantic. Tomorrow we tell the story of another American weapon the enemy never saw coming and never understood until it was far too late. Subscribe, and we'll see you there.